A series of pogroms against Jews in the city of Odessa, then part of the Russian Empire, took place during the 19th and early 20th centuries. They occurred in 1821, 1859, 1871, 1881, 1886, and 1905. According to Jarrod Tanny, most historians argue that the earlier incidents were a result of frictions unleashed by modernization rather than anti-Semitism. The 1905 pogrom was markedly larger in scale and anti-Semitism played a central role. Odessa is a port city on the Black Sea and its multi-ethnic population included Greek, Jewish, Russian, Ukrainian, and other communities. 1821 pogrom. The 1821 pogrom, perpetrated by ethnic Greeks rather than Russians, is named in some sources as the first in the modern period in Russia. In Odessa, Greeks and Jews were two rival ethnic and economic communities living side by side. The first Odessa pogrom, in 1821, was linked to the outbreak of the Greek War for Independence, during which the Jews were accused of sympathizing with the Ottoman authorities and of aiding the Turks in killing the Greek Patriarch of Constantinople, Gregory V, dragging his dead body through the streets and finally throwing it into the Bosphorus. 1859 pogrom. According to the Jewish Encyclopedia, the community did not escape the horrors of the pogrom. Indeed, the very first pogrom in Russia occurred in Odessa in the year 1859. This was in reality not a Russian but a Greek pogrom, for the leaders and almost all of the participants were Greek sailors from ships in the harbor, and local Greeks who joined them. The pogrom occurred on a Christian Easter, and the local press, in no wise unfriendly to the Jews, attempted to transform it into an accidental fight, the Greek colony at the time being dominant in the administration as well as in the commerce of Odessa. Further pogroms occurred in 1871, 1881, and 1886. Historians note economic antagonism between the two urban minorities, in addition to religious frictions. 1871 pogrom. However, after 1871, the pogroms in Odessa took a form more typical of the rest of the Russian Empire. Although the pogrom of 1871 was occasioned in part by a rumor that Jews had vandalized the Greek community's church, many non-Greeks participated to it. Russian resentment and hostility toward Jews came to the fore in the pogrom of 1871 as Russians joined Greeks in attacks on Jews. Thereafter, Russians filled the ranks of pogromist mobs in 1881, 1900, and 1905. In the 1881 and 1905 pogroms, many Greek houses were also destroyed. The 1871 pogrom is seen as something of a turning point in Russian Jewish history. The Odessa pogrom led some Jewish publicists, exemplified by the writer Peretz Smolenskin, to question belief in the possibility of Jewish integration into Christian society, and to call for a greater awareness of Jewish national identity. 1881 to 1906 period. In the post-1871 period, pogroms were often perpetrated with tacit approval of the Tsarist authorities. Evidence exists that during the 1905 pogrom, the army supported the mob. The Bolshevik Pyatnitsky, who was in Odessa at the time, recalls what happened there. I saw the following scene. A gang of young men, between 25 and 20 years old, among whom there were plainclothes policemen and members of the Okhrana, were rounding up anyone who looked like a Jew, men, women and children, stripping them naked and beating them mercilessly. We immediately organized a group of revolutionaries armed with revolvers. We ran up to them and fired at them. They ran away, but suddenly between us and the pogromists there appeared a solid wall of soldiers, armed to the teeth and facing us. We retreated. The soldiers went away, and the pogromists came out again. This happened a few times. It became clear to us that the pogromists were acting together with the military. 1905 pogrom. The 1905 pogrom of Odessa was the worst anti-Jewish pogrom in Odessa's history. Between October 18 and 22, 1905, ethnic Russians, Ukrainians, and Greeks killed over 400 Jews and damaged or destroyed over 1,600 Jewish properties. Background of Jews in Odessa. The city of Odessa, founded in the late 18th century, encouraged foreign immigration, especially for the purpose of promoting economic growth. For this reason, Jews were far more welcome in Odessa than in many other parts of the Pale of Settlement. Nonetheless, Jews of Odessa were not viewed as equal to non-Jewish residents and were familiar with antisemitism. A number of serious anti-Jewish pogroms occurred during the 19th century in Odessa, and rumors of a pogrom appeared each year around Easter time. Jewish and Russian youths also often got into violent fights with each other. Causes: the combination of economic downturn, Jewish backing of Japan in the war against Russia, Jewish opposition to the October Manifesto, and the June 1905 massacre all contributed to great tension between Gentiles and the Jewish community in Odessa in 1905. Long-term causes: antisemitism among Greeks. Growing antisemitism as a result of the changing place of Jews in Odessa's economy created an environment conducive to a pogrom. When the Crimean War disrupted trade routes, many Greek commercial firms shifted the business out of Odessa due to bankruptcy or a willingness to seek more profitable trading locations. To fill the resulting vacuum in grain trade, Jewish merchants expanded business and began to acquire greater profits. Many factors contributed to the spread of antisemitism among Greeks in Odessa, including the success of many Jewish traders, the preferential hiring of Jewish workers, and rumors of hostile actions by Jews toward Greeks. Antisemitism among Russians. Many Russians blamed the Jews for their own troubles, such as limited employment opportunities and lower wages. They cited dramatic Jewish population growth in Odessa, from 14% in 1858 to 35% in 1897. These numbers contributed to suspicion that Jews possessed great wealth, power, and influence in Odessa. Although by the end of the 19th century Jews held high positions in manufacturing, the majority of wealth in Odessa belonged to non-Jews. Jews certainly did not dominate the economy of Odessa, nor did they control Odessa politically. Unlike other ethnic and religious groups, wealthy Jews could not transform wealth into political power. Out of 3,449 total staff, only 71 Jews worked for the imperial government. After an 1892 civic reform, Jews could no longer elect representatives to city councils. Instead, a special office for municipal affairs appointed 6 Jews to the 60-person Odessa City Council. Given that 35% of Odessa's population in 1897 consisted of Jews, the 10% Jewish city council was hardly representative. Immediate causes: a significant economic downturn in Odessa at the turn of the 20th century played a major part in the October pogrom. Restricted trading, reduced industrial production, and the Russo-Japanese War led to high unemployment in Odessa. Many despised Jews for layoffs during the economic recession. Hatred for Jews heightened when a number of Jews did not support the war with Japan. Patriotic Russians called Jews unpatriotic and disloyal. Fear of a pogrom in April 1905 prompted the National Committee of Jewish Self-Defense to urge Jews to arm themselves and protect the property. Non-Jews were threatened with armed retaliation if a pogrom occurred. Although a pogrom did not take place until October Fear of one re-emerged in June when Jews were declared culpable for instigating shootings as well as fires at the port. On June 13, 1905, Cossacks shot several striking workers. The next day, large groups of workers stopped working and attacked police with rocks and guns. The battleship Potemkin, whose crew had mutinied on June 14, arrived in Odessa that evening. Thousands of Odessans went to the port to see the battleship and support the mutinous sailors. During the afternoon of the 15th of June, the unruly crowd began to raid warehouses and set fire to wooden buildings in the harbor. Chaos ensued when, in order to prevent further unrest, the military blocked off the harbor and fired into the crowd. Strikes, disorder, and the arrival of Potemkin caused the death of over 1,000 people at the port of Odessa. A few days after the atrocious incident at the harbor, an anti-Semitic pamphlet called Odessa.The appeared, blaming the Jews for the tragedy. Odessa.The demanded compensation by Jews to the non-Jews, disarmament of Jews in Odessa, and a search of all Jewish apartments in the city. Although the events of June did not immediately cause a pogrom, an anti-Semitic environment had been formed, sufficient for the October pogrom. On October 17, Tsar Nicholas II issued the October Manifesto, which established civil liberties for the people and promised to create an elected assembly. It was reported in Odessa on October 18, causing celebration in the streets. Jews hoped that the manifesto would lead to greater freedom and less anti-Semitism in the Russian Empire. While many Jews and liberals in Odessa celebrated the October Manifesto, conservatives saw the document as a threat to the autocracy and the might of the Russian Empire. The October pogrom build-up to pogrom, October 14th, 17th. On October 14th, a number of high school students skipped classes and attempted, but failed, to join rallies taking place at the university due to police intervention. In the process of intercepting them, armed policemen injured several children. The next day, radical students and revolutionaries armed themselves and encouraged other workers to lend them support. On October 16th, students and workers took to the streets and erected barricades. They tried to preserve order. The police fought them and killed several students. Although a public funeral had been planned for the students, the Odessa city governor, D.M. Nedat, had the bodies buried secretly to limit rallying around the deaths. On October 17th, the police and military continued to monitor the streets, though no major confrontations occurred. About 4,000 workers, including many Jews, went on strike. Crisis, October 18th. On October 18th, Jews and liberals cheered over the news of the October Manifesto. Although demonstrations began peacefully, they quickly turned violent. Those chanting anti-regime propaganda caused trouble when they took out red flags and anti-imperial propaganda. As violence increased between supporters and opponents of the October Manifesto, members of the latter group began to take out their anger on Odessa's Jews, identifying them as the root of Russia's troubles. When a group of Jews asked a few Russian workers to show respect to a red flag, a fight broke out on the streets and soon turned into an anti-Jewish riot. Pogrom, October 19th-21 stone. The bulk of the October pogrom took place on October 19-21 and was worst on October 20th. Violence spread all over Odessa, from the city center, to the suburbs, and to nearby villages. The rioters demonstrated excellent organization throughout sections of Odessa, coordinating the numbers based on the size of the neighborhood under attack. Rather than working to protect Jews and end the pogrom, many policemen and soldiers wearing civilian clothes watched or participated in the massacre, though they suffered many casualties and were eventually vanquished. Jewish self-defense forces successfully successfully defended some houses as well as streets and even neighborhoods. On October 21, after much of the pogrom was over, the city governor of Odessa, D.M. and the commander of the Odessa military garrison, A.V. Kalbaz, appeared in the streets, and told the rioters to get off the streets and go home. Nedat and Kalbaz's inaction up to this point became the subject of debate and led to Nedat's subsequent resignation from office. Aftermath and Jewish response. Various reports estimate the number of Jews killed in the October pogrom from 302 to 1,000. Other relevant statistics from the pogrom include approximately 5,000 injured Jews, 3.75 million rubles in property damage, 1,400 ruined business, and 3,000 families forced into poverty. The Odessa Jewish Central Committee to aid the victims of the pogroms of 1905 collected 672,833 rubles from Jews in Odessa and abroad to aid those hurt by the pogrom. In total, the committee assisted 2,499 families affected by the October pogrom.